Hello, beautiful people, and welcome again to another channel of Soul Vision. Today, very interesting, we've got David Lucas, who's going to be with us today, and he's going to be speaking about alchemy and mental alchemy, which you're going to find to be a profound awareness. And remember to subscribe to our channel below, hit the like button, and remember to also share with your friends. So before we go on to Dave, I'd like to introduce Colette.
Hi, I'm Colette, and I'm Lisa's sister. And I'm the background part of Soul Vision that you don't see so often.
So welcome, Dave. Dave, we believe that you are an NLP master practitioner as well as an engineer and also a software developer. You're also the CEO of Dawning Truth, a personal development and training and recruiting company. And you're going to be chatting to us a little bit today about alchemy and also mental alchemy. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Lisa. It's so nice to be here today.
So Dave's got a wonderful question for you guys, and we'd like you to comment below. Dave, your question?
Sure. My question is this. Is it possible to attain this mystical enlightenment or self-realization, or is it just some airy-fairy idea that no one can ever attain, and that's just really a waste of a person's time? I'd love to know your opinion on that.
So let us know your thoughts, comment below. So Dave, to start off a little bit about alchemy. So alchemy, we always know that it's changing, it's basically changing lead into gold. Okay, and it's kind of like, we would say it's very much of a magical sort of like transformation. So can you explain a little bit more to us about alchemy and also mental alchemy?
Sure. So the basic idea of alchemy, if we're looking at it from a pure chemistry sense, is how to get rich quick, you see. So we got this piece of lead. How do we turn this piece of lead into gold? And men have spent centuries trying to figure that out. And interesting enough, Isaac Newton, the famous Isaac Newton, was spent probably 80% of his life actually trying to figure out alchemy, which is a little known fact about Isaac Newton. And the idea is that there must be some chemical process that you can use to transform a base metal like lead into a valuable metal like silver or gold. And that was alchemy. And our whole modern science of chemistry actually comes from alchemy. But there's another mystical aspect to it. And, you know, in this conversation, we're more interested in the mystical, spiritual things than the purely what you can see with your eyes. And in that sense, we have this idea called mental alchemy. So if we think of alchemy as a metaphor or an analogy for how we can perfect ourselves spiritually, then we get a different set of insights. So we have these base metals in ourselves, our lead, which would be all our negative emotions. That would be ones that so many people are experiencing at the moment: the angers, the frustrations, the getting annoyed, the impatience, the worry, the fear, all those kind of negative emotions that really weigh us down in life. That would be the lead. And the gold would be the highest spiritual emotion. So I actually made a list here, which I've translated from the Greek, of the fruits of the spirit. And I think that these really describe the gold very well. So we have this idea of love as a choice, contentment, serenity, calmness under pressure, practical kindness, intrinsic goodness, and faith that the best will be. And I think this list of fruits of the spirit is really, really powerful because it enables us to have an idea of this grand vision of the perfection of the soul. So mental alchemy is in essence the steps of transmuting all these negative feelings and emotions and limiting thought patterns into the enabling beliefs and emotions and thought patterns that allow us to maximize our potential and to elevate ourselves to the best we can possibly be.
So Dave, would you say that if we have to look at the lead transforming into gold, would the lead be what we are dissatisfied with in our personal lives?
So I wouldn't necessarily say it's the satisfaction as much as it is those feelings that we typically would call negative.
Mm-hmm.
Fear.
That would include like our old belief
anxiety,
system as well?
Lust. Old belief system, yes. That limiting belief system, that can'tness versus canness. I can't do this, I'm inferior, all that kind of shame, all that kind of negative thing, which I know you deal with a lot in your line of work. That is what I would say refers to the goal, the lead. And the gold would be the positive emotions. I can do this, I can succeed, I can make this happen, etc. That's my understanding of what the metaphor means. It might be useful to quickly touch on the basic steps of mental alchemy, just so that it makes a little bit of sense. And then I'll mention a couple of tools that we can use. So if you're looking at your classical alchemy, there's about 7 steps in the classical alchemy, and each of them tied to mental alchemy. But to keep it a bit simpler for the listeners today, I'm going to just kind of compress the steps a bit and make it a bit simpler to understand. So we've got 5 basic steps to mental alchemy. The first one is this idea of self-observation. If you don't know yourself, how can you improve yourself? It's the beginning of all personal development, the beginning of all improvement. If I do not know I have a particular issue, if I'm not self-aware, let's take a real example. I prefer real examples, and sometimes I do expose myself a little bit in these things, but I'd rather use real examples that we know works and is practiced, rather than just talking on some theoretical level. So one that I've had to deal with is anger. And I think almost the whole South Africa has that problem too. It's probably even the world is a very common problem. And what happened was, many years ago, I was working for this company and I was constantly in trouble, and I never knew why. Nobody liked me and I never knew why. And I was so frustrated, it was driving me crazy. What is wrong? Why does nobody like me? Anyway, I went on this Bosberaad fancy training course, and they had me in the session, and I was facilitating the session. I video recorded the whole thing, and I was literally doing this. I was banging on the table. I was so aggressive and forceful. And I went, you know what? I don't like that guy. Looking at myself. Suddenly, I gained this incredible self-awareness and went, oh, the problem is the anger. It's the aggression. It's the forcefulness. And from there, that was actually the great insight that led to a significant improvement in that aspect of my life. So that's that idea of that self-observation, that awareness of the self. Then secondly, we need to understand our reactions and why we react in that way. So I'm getting angry, I'm being aggressive, but why am I being aggressive? Am I being aggressive because I'm a jerk? Am I being aggressive because, in my case, I grew up in a family where my father was very aggressive, and there is a bit of a DNA thing. The whole family is pretty feisty, so I'm fighting with genes, genetics, yeah? So that's part of the factor. And there's a couple of other factors. And when I go into the tools, I'll mention how one can discover this. But why am I actually reacting like this? Because if I don't know the root cause, I can't do anything about it either. It's fine to know you're angry, but if you don't know why you're angry, how's that going to help you? You need to know why you're angry. So once you have that understanding of why you're angry, then you move on to the third step, which is to create alternative ways of reacting. So now I understand I'm angry because I'm afraid. Why am I afraid? Well, I'm afraid because I need to be in control of the situations. I can't trust other people to do what they're going to say they're going to do. And because of that, I have to force them to do. Sorry?
Dave, you so often find that people that are angry, it stems from fear. Very often.
Very much so.
That.
Yeah, they say people hurt people.
Yeah, so true. Say that again, Colette.
Hurt people hurt people.
That's brilliant. Absolutely. And it's unfortunately so true. I would almost go so far as to say that almost all the evil in the world is caused by some form of emotional trauma.
Absolutely.
So yeah, definitely. So very much the case. So, with anger, I would say it's also that sense of being out of control. So I want to control people, and therefore I use aggression and force. So then we create these alternative ways of reacting. So if I know I'm afraid, if I know I'm feeling out of control, I can think to myself, and this is what I actually did in the situation, how do I, my original question to myself was, how do I control people? That was actually the question. Yeah, I know, but that was the question. How do I control people better? And then I realized, hang on a second, well, this isn't going to work. There's a thing called free will. I went, okay, that's not going to work. Then I go, well, how do if I know I can't control people, what about influencing people? I went, hang on a second, but I know a lot about that. I'm in sales. I know how to persuade people. Why don't I just work with the principles of influence? And then by doing that, then that dramatically reduced the need for being angry, because I had another way of getting what I needed to get. And over the years, I discovered additional ways. But I think the key idea here was I had this behavior which had this meta need, this, what do they call it? This underlying need. And I needed to find another way of meeting the underlying need without all the negative aspects of that lead emotion, the anger. So once we understand those ways of reacting, then we need to change the way we think in our emotional reaction. So the way we think is typically what we tell ourselves, but there's also a bit more to it. But in simple terms, you know, if I'm telling myself they're not going to listen to me, or I'm telling myself that person's a jerk and I'm so good and they're so bad, I'm sure you know lots of people that do that. You know, all these things, whatever I'm telling myself must be true because I'm telling it to myself. So I'm building all these lovely, beautiful negative belief patterns just to tie myself up even more, you know, more shackles to bind me. But when I start recognizing those belief patterns, and there's a tool called the de-locker, but I won't go into that today. It's just a little bit, takes a bit of time to explain. But suffice to say, you know, there are ways of breaking those negative belief patterns. And by doing that, by finding exceptions to those negative belief patterns, I can now start bringing in more positive self-dialogue. So I can start to say, you know what, people are interested in what I got to say. People do like me, and I treat people in a nice way. So it starts with that self-dialogue, which starts to change my thought patterns. And then as I repeat that self-dialogue, it starts to change my beliefs. So now I start a more constructive path of belief. And then as I change my thought patterns and my beliefs, then my emotions change. Because no longer is that person the enemy. I'm going to sort you out. Come mess with me. I'll mess you. No, hang on a sec. This person is a potential friend, a potential ally. Oh, well, now we act in a different way because my belief and my frame, which is my mental way of thinking about the situation, is different. So that's the idea of transforming the thinking and emotion reactions. And then the last one, which is normally the one that people want to change first, but it's actually one you've got to change last. Because if you haven't done the others, it doesn't work. And that is changing your actual behavior. So now I'm actually build a new habit of not being angry all the time. I build a new habit of being calmer, where before I get angry, now I build a habit of being calm. Does that make sense?
So the one thing is, though, you say, okay, so we have to have our self-dialogue, which you can do, you know, affirmations, sort of like all my relationships are easy, you know, that type of thing. Now you're looking at your thoughts, okay, your thoughts and your feelings. It's obviously to get it to a positive state, okay? But looking at that as well, we can't suppress our thoughts and feelings. So when we're not thinking the positive line, okay, obviously we don't want to suppress it. So what other techniques would you suggest besides the self-talk, the self-dialogue?
All right, Lisa, you'll have to ask me the really hard questions, eh? All right, we'll have to talk about the de-locker. I'll just go through it briefly.
So Colette, have you got anything you could think of? Well, now we don't want to suppress our feelings. We've got these feelings and they're negative, okay? We don't want the negative. So we've got our positive dialogue to help us. What else can we do? I would say perhaps meditation.
I was just going to say meditation.
Watching something positive.
Journaling.
I think there's two key principles. The one thing is that we have these locked beliefs, and I'll explain to the de-lock in a second. The second thing is we have the habits of thought. So the thought we think a lot is the thought we find easiest to think more. So it's almost, in a sense, a bit like changing your eating habits. So every morning you get up and you eat a big waffle. Then you end up looking like a Michelin man and you go, this isn't working for me. I need to change this. Great. So then you say, I'm not going to eat waffles anymore. I'm going to eat oats. The first couple of days while you're eating those waffles, that oats, you're thinking waffles. You probably even make yourself waffles out there and go, let me go and get the oats. So it's this mental, that's why I call it a habit, because it's the thought that repeating all the time. So just deliberately repeating the thought you want, even though initially it's going to be hard. Those first 21 days can be very hard, but eventually it does form a new pattern. And that's also where that self-observation comes in, where you catch yourself with the old thought and you say, okay, that was the old one, now let's have a new one.
Yeah, I always sort of call that to self-correct. So you know, when you find yourself in a state where you don't really want to be and you know it's negative and it's not good for you, it doesn't align with your higher self, you kind of like say to yourself, self-correct, you know, do that. So it becomes like a pattern and you kind of like checking up on yourself all the time.
I suppose this is a way that you're getting your brains, all the nodes in your brain to refire because they're going along that path that's easy. Try and retrain them a new path.
Yeah, and I always say that if you want an easier life, you've got to do the things that appear to be difficult in the beginning. So you have to set your standards, have your disciplines. Once you've got that, then your life is easy. But if you don't want to do the disciplines and you want to have the easy beginning, your life is more difficult in the long run.
I agree. Absolutely. It's all about habit, ultimately. So the way that de-locker works, let's take a limiting belief that many people have. I'm not good enough. I know I had that one. Lots of people got that.
And most people do. Most people do.
Yeah. So what you do, you turn it into a question that acknowledges and denies it. So you say something like this. A possibility could exist that I am not good enough, couldn't it? And you go, yeah. And a possibility could exist that I am good enough, couldn't it? And you go, yep. And now you're holding two contradicting thoughts in your brain at the exact same time. And your brain go, I can't process this because this is on an unconscious neurological layer. It's like, no. It just can't handle it. And then it goes, okay, maybe I need to think about this new, and that breaks the lock. But then you go, okay. Yeah, but maybe I'm kind of not good enough, but I'm also am good enough, and I can also learn to be better. And now that limiting belief is broken. So that's what the de-locker does in simple terms. It's the contradicting question. And then in terms of the tools, which you asked me about. So we've got three tools. We've got the OWL, we've got the 5 whys, and we've got deep breathing that you can use to.
Okay, so let's start with the 5 whys.
Yeah.
You want to start with the 5 whys.
Let's start with
Let's
5.
make it 6. Why do we
I
have
actually had them in that
whys?
order for a reason, but we'll start with the 5 whys. So the 5 whys actually comes from industrial engineering. So industrial engineering is these guys that go in these factories. Maybe you've heard the word Kaizen. It's quite a popular word. So they go into a factory, and what happened was they're supposed to make baked beans, and a whole batch of baked beans came off the line, and the tins were all warped. Oh no, what happened? So I used the 5 whys to figure out what happened. And it's very simple to do. You just ask the question why 5 times. Okay. So if you take the I'm not good enough one, I'm
why
not good
5 times?
They found 5 on average is good enough. I find between 3 and 7. Normally on 3 you're getting some serious results there, but normally between 5 is a good average. But yeah, it's just generally you get to the root cause of problem on about number 4 or 5, I found. So if we take that limiting belief we spoke about, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. Why am I not good enough? What was it with me? I'm too young. Okay. So why is being too young not good enough? Because I don't have any experience, I don't have any knowledge. So why is not having any experience and any knowledge make me not good enough? Well, because I can't give people any advice or counsel because I don't have any knowledge. So why can't I give people any advice or counsel because I don't have any knowledge? And now I'm starting hitting the block because actually, well, it's not true. I actually can give people, I can even talk about my own life experience. Oh, hang on a sec. Oh, and so I lack knowledge, but I can gain knowledge. I can study, I can go read books, which is actually what I did. And I went and studied NLP and all of other things. I gained knowledge. I ended up using a technique called photo reading to put 10,000 books in my unconscious mind. So yeah, you can gain knowledge. So hang on a sec. Whoa, where's all this limitation coming from? But you can see how these things work. And once you start questioning those 5 whys, you end up at that limiting belief. And then it's normally pretty easy to challenge because it's normally a little bit, this ain't quite true. It's a bit dodge, the belief when you get to the bottom normally. So
yeah, so it's really breaking it down and segmenting it. And that's where you get your true answers from.
Yeah, and seeing that your brain actually is just jumping to conclusions, not with any logic.
It does it because our beliefs are hierarchical. So they start at the top and then they go down into low level. So you've got your evidence, so here's all my evidence. These are things that happen and this builds up into this belief here. So maybe in my case, I think it was, I was bullied as a child. That was like really rough, so I was bullied and other kids didn't like me. It was difficult. So that created this foundation that it will always be that way, but it's not true. It's not true. That's called a universal quantifier in fancy NLP complicated language, which in simple terms means when you say always. So you will always be a failure. That's a universal quantifier. Nobody likes you. It's another example. Nobody, you should, not one person alive likes you. Well, my dog likes me. Oh, okay, your dog likes
there
me.
we go.
That's
a good start.
you know. Oh, actually, you know, my kids like me. My friends like, oh, you mean a couple of people? Oh, well, maybe it's not so limiting after all. So that's that idea that you're talking about. And then when you start breaking those things, then suddenly the mind moves out of the stuck state into the state of fluidity, which is where we're trying to get it, because now we can explore and find new options. And that's what gives us the breakthrough.
Right. Okay, so that's the one method. Can you tell us about the other one, the owl?
The owl. The owl's my favorite. Okay.
Hoot.
So the owl comes from deep mysticism. Well, you know
Obviously,
the kind of
the
stuff.
owl is wisdom. I love the owl.
It's exactly that. It's that kind of stuff where they say, you know, this is so super secret. It's dangerous if we let this knowledge out. So we never let the knowledge of enlightenment out. And then nobody's enlightened. We say, hey, the world's such a terrible place. Yeah, maybe it's because you should have opened your mouth, Mr. Super spiritual teacher, and taught us everything and written documented notes. Don't leave it to your followers 200 years later to write down what you said, for crying out loud, you know. And there's more than one that's guilty of that, unfortunately. But the owl comes from this idea, and you are correct, wisdom, and very much is the metaphor for wisdom. And the idea here is you've got darkness and light. So you're probably familiar with the analogy for darkness and light. And darkness meaning ignorance, I don't have knowledge. And light meaning knowledge.
Enlightened knowledge.
I know. Yeah, the light of knowledge. In actual fact, the word enlightenment refers to this idea of knowledge, being filled with the light of knowledge. So what happens here is we have this ignorance. And to give you an idea of how powerful darkness is, and I challenge you and I challenge all your listeners and viewers today to try this one. Go home and take something, and maybe take your cell phone, for example, and ask your spouse or family member to put it in your bedroom and somewhere in the open, so not hide it, just put it down in the bedroom at night and switch off the light and go into your room and see how long it takes you to find that object. All right? Then do the exact same thing, get them to put the object in a different place with the light on, go in and see how long it takes you to find that object. I mean, even in your mind, you can figure out, it's like, you can't compare, but it's like, a fun way to do. I've actually done this a couple of times, and I do it as a type of meditation.
Well, listen, I think most of us have done it, especially with our ESCOM, the way it is at the moment, with all our power outages that we're experiencing here in South Africa. So so we've all kind of done that.
So that is a great metaphor for ignorance, because it's just so much harder to do anything. You just don't know. And the owl, remember, owls, big eyes, see in the dark. So the owl sits on your shoulder and sees in the dark. What is the dark? The dark is your own ignorance of yourself in this case. So, and for some other reason, it's weird. I've tried on the left shoulder. I've tried on the right shoulder. It seems to work better on the right shoulder. I don't know why, but it just seems to work better on the right shoulder. So put the owl over here. I actually imagine feeling his little claws here on my shoulder. A big owl, but so big. And he's got these big eyes, and he looks and he observes you. Everything you do. He doesn't judge. He doesn't say it's good or bad. He just looks. He looks at every thought. He looks at every feeling, every emotion, every action. And you can see him looking because it's your imagination. So you can see everything he's seeing, but you're living your life normal. And you just have this extra perspective that says what you're doing. And I'll give you an example. So yesterday I was like really tired. I mean, I worked like a machine, and it was late in the day. I was exhausted. I was finished. And I felt a little bit obligated to spend some time with my son, because he was a bit ill and I hadn't spent time with him, and I was actually not up to it, but I just felt a bit obligated. So I thought, you know what, I must be a good father, I must go spend some time with him. So I went to his room, I sat down, and I just started annoying him. And basically, eventually told me, please go away, you know. And then I sat there and, I got space. And I actually apologized to him and everything later. And I said to him, you know what it was? I was not aware that I was tired and I actually needed space. I should have just said to him, look, I need space and I'll give you attention later. That would have actually been the right thing. But because I was self-aware from the owl, afterwards, because the owl showed me everything I did and all my emotions and feelings and thinking while I was doing it. And then I picked up, there was a strong emotion of, I just want to be left alone. I went,
So it's really taking yourself out of that situation and seeing yourself from as an observer.
Yes. In NLP speak, they call that the third person.
Yeah.
So it's very much so. Because if you can have, because the reason we don't know ourselves is because we live in ourselves, if you think about it. But other people see us for who we really are, at least externally. And we don't always, you know, they call it the blind spot in the Johari window, you know. And the owl helps you to a large extent to reduce that blind spot, because now you see yourself as you really and truly are, unbiased, unprejudiced.
And I think that, you know, that's one of the key pillars, is to be aware. And to be aware is when you can actually observe what you're doing, who you are, where you are, what the situation is.
And I think to be able to observe the situation without your own emotions or stories attached to it. So just see it like clinically almost.
Yeah. And then that's when you can actually really gain true power, you know, and true control, not as in controlling, but your true control over things by being aware. Would you not agree?
Well, that's exactly where it comes from. Because if I know what's going, how can I influence? I don't like the word control though.
Yeah.
Because of the implication of lack of free will. There's a lot of big philosophical debates about self-determination, but we won't get into those today. But it's a very interesting topic. But what I will say is if we, how can we, I mean, let's take a car. If you do not know how a car works and how to turn the steering wheel and change the gears, you can never drive a car. If you do not know how your emotions work, you can never get self-mastery. You can never attain it. It's the same logic. So yes, I agree with you 100%.
I also think, you know, our waves of our energy, they really dictate our fate in a sense, because if we're on the wrong wave, we are going to fall, you know. So we want to be on the right wave with the correct momentum, positive wave.
Very much so. And that's exactly what happens, you know. If we're on this wave of I see it a lot, unfortunately, these days, with people being influenced by pandemics and that, and I have the opportunity to help a lot of people through this because of my line of work. And one of the things I'm always telling people is it's all about the mind. If your mind is weak, you are finished. You cannot let your mind be defeated. Even if your body, even if everything around you is defeated, the mind has to be strong. And then people tell me it's so hard. I say, you know, it's hard to get up in the morning and brush your teeth and get out of bed. It's hard to go to work. It's hard to look after your kids, but you do it anyway, because you've got to. It's the same logic. You've got to do this, so you do it anyway. Even if it's hard, it becomes easier with practice, but it always starts off hard.
It's also, you know, I also relate it to sort of like a self-cleansing as well, you know, that we kind of like go there and we all shower and bath and, you know, put on clean clothes and so on. But we often forget to self-cleanse and deep within, and part of that is also getting rid of those negative emotions, you know, becoming aware, you know, that is all part of self-cleansing, and obviously to reach your maximum awareness.
Yeah. And if you think you're creating
and that's the very idea of alchemy.
You're creating your future from the vibration that you're at, it's really so important that you change it, because if you don't change it, you're just going to get stuck where you are.
It's like building a bridge with broken bricks.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you're not going to get to the other side. So tell us a little bit about the deep breathing.
So the deep breathing, now this one is quite interesting. I heard about the story from my chiropractor of all people. I was busy discussing mental alchemy, because I discuss with everybody. My view is the more people you discuss with, the more tips you get. And
yes, we know that. We have these regular discussions when you come into my center.
That's why I enjoy them. Can learn, and we should be learned from each other, and that's for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I was having a chat with her about this, and she told me a very interesting medical fact, and I thought, wow, this is weird, but okay. So the medical fact is that if you do deep breathing, it stimulates your vagus nerve. So unconsciously in your what's called your autonomic nervous system, which is your unconscious nervous system that controls things like your breathing and your heartbeat and the vasodilation and all these different aspects of your mind and your body. You've got two types of systems. You've got the parasympathetic and you've got the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is activated under fight or flight response, which would be like if you are walking down the road and the dog just suddenly runs to the gun and goes, whoa, and you jump out your skin. What? That would be an example of a sympathetic nervous system response. That feeling of a fright. Now, a lot of us have a low-level version of that while we're busy driving in the traffic and someone cuts in front of us, or someone upsets us at work, or whatever version of that story. But that's still all stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system basically means all is well, I'm at peace, and it calms down the body, it calms down the system. And it's that state of what we could call well-being or contentment. And what happens is when there's a trauma, a really bad thing happens to somebody, maybe they were attacked. I mean, I had one where I went to our local supermarket and I'm busy looking at the newspaper. That was my first mistake. And the guy's parking there and he's got a gun. He shows me the gun. He says, hey. I go, hey. I said, how you doing? He says, well, I got a gun. I said, cool. I said, hey, listen, can I go? He says, no, you can't go. I said, okay, what would you like me to do? He says, no, please go sit down there. I said, cool, no problem. I go sit down, totally calm. And, you know, and the robbery was over. Then I was all adrenalized, you know. Too much adrenaline going in the system. The cops are there. I'm trying to help them. And the cops are like irritated with me. Listen, we've got video footage. We don't even need to talk to you. Like, yeah, whatever. But afterwards, it was like, oh my gosh, I could have died. You know, there was that state of panic that set in. And in a situation like this, how do you deal with it? Well, the problem is that memory is sympathetic stimulation. So in your brain, in your actual neurons, you know, your neurons, they connect to each other. And you got all these various neurotransmitters and minerals, like potassium is one of the favorites, that helps with all this connection between the neurons. When we have stress, our body releases cortisol, as you're probably aware, the stress hormone. And the function of cortisol is to stop brain function. What? Why would it do that? Well, your brain has all these connections, and if you don't stop it under extreme stress, you're going to traumatize the entire brain. And that is why people under stress crack. That's what happened. There just wasn't enough stopping of the cortisol. The cortisol just wasn't strong enough, maybe the adrenaline too much, you know, like in war when those adrenal glands are working all the time. So that's why people crack. So what happens is this stops it, which is good. So it keeps you sane. But that trauma and that energy stays activated for years on end. Could be the person's entire life. So what we got to do now, how do we end that? Now there's various ways. The delocker helps to some extent, but the one I found works like gangbusters. And trust me, I've tried all of them: EFT, EMDR, NLP, dissociation. I've been studying this stuff for 30 years, too long, you know. And the one that really works is just deep breathing, because all you do, you revivify the memory, go through it, let all the feelings go, but can you just, I just accept that it's going to be traumatic. That's all right. And just go through it. But while you're going through it now, you're going to want to breathe and get all hyper breathing, you know, because it's sympathetic nervous system. And then you just do that deep, like your yoga type of breathing. Very, very deep breathing where your out breath is longer than your in breath, and you hold it for a couple of seconds. Like you could work with the count of 4 in, hold for about, say, 3 or 4, and then 6 or 7 out, something like that. But you've got to adjust, but not everyone's as fit or has the same lung capacity. But you know, that type of breathing, counting, and then by doing that, that stimulates the vagus nerve, which is basically on your stomach. It stimulates the vagus nerve, and it must be deep diaphragmatic breathing as well. So it's the same type of breathing you do in yoga, where you breathe into your stomach. You don't breathe high in the chest. You don't breathe in the middle. It's right at the bottom, because it moves. That's your diaphragm that's actually stimulating the nerve. So you do that very deep diaphragmatic breathing in that very slow rate while you think about the memory. And what starts to happen is the first few times you want to go crazy, because it's a heavy memory. But as you go through it a few times, you feel calmer and calmer and calm, and eventually release it. And that's the absolute beauty of this. So yeah, that's what the deep breathing is all about.
There's another exercise you can also do for the vagus nerve, and that's the vibratory one, where you kind of put your mouth like this and make the V sound. Let me just move this. So it's like, and you'll feel everything starts to vibrate in your whole body. It's also quite cool.
couple
Very
of times.
interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I think it would be quite nice if you could run some workshops on mental alchemy. Would you be interested in that, Dave?
Yeah, why not? Let's run one. We can discuss the details and let your viewers know about it. But yeah, I think we should do something like that, and we can maybe do it like over a weekend, like a 2-day thing, and we can really go into it and take people to.
So we can go into it a little bit deeper.
And yeah, I think it really add a lot of value to people, and that's what we want. We want to spread the light. Make the world a better place.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, thank you so much for your time today. It's really been awesome chatting to you. And remember to our viewers to subscribe to our channel below, hit the like button, and please share with all your friends.
Thank you so much. It was really, really interesting. A lot of new knowledge.
Yeah, thank you so much for the chance to share some of the things I've learned. I hope it benefits the viewers and helps people live happier and more fulfilling lives.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye.
Yeah.